Some stories have it all. This one, it's got a gorgeous beach resort, a powerful family matriarch, and a corporate battle so intense it went all the way to the Supreme Court. It all kicks off with a death in the family, and it ends with a legal ruling that changes the game.
And really, it all boils down to this one huge question. When the person holding most of the power, most of the shares, is suddenly gone, you get this massive power vacuum. And in this case, that vacuum didn't just shake things up. It tore a family and their entire business right in two. So let's break down exactly how this family feud turned into a legal firestorm. All right, here's our roadmap. First, we'll meet the Marasigan family and get to know their resort. Then, we'll dive into how the battle for control erupted, which leads us to this really critical legal idea called a quorum. We're going to follow the case through the courts, unpack the Supreme Court's final decision, and then, most importantly, figure out what this all means for any family out there running a business.
Okay, so our story begins with the Marasigan family and their company, Ganco Resorts. Ganco runs the La Luz Beach Resort, a beautiful spot in Batangas. Now, this company was started by the matriarch, Luz Marasigan, along with her 13 children. But here's the thing. Ganco wasn't your typical company. It was specifically set up as a closed corporation, and their founding document, the Articles of Incorporation, had this one critical line. The business would be managed by the board of directors, who were also the stockholders. In a company like this, the owners and the managers are the very same people. That's going to be important later.
And here's a look at the power structure. It's pretty clear who was in charge. Luz, the matriarch, held 3,000 shares. Each of her 13 kids had just 200, so she held more shares than all of her children combined. When it came down to it, she had the final say, period.
And then, everything changed. Luz passed away. All of a sudden, those 3,000 majority shares were in limbo, tied up in her unsettled estate. The undisputed leader was gone, and the company's future was completely up for grabs. This power vacuum didn't just create uncertainty, it led to an all-out battle for control. With Luz gone, the Marasigan siblings pretty much immediately split into two opposing factions. And this is where it gets messy. Just days after their mother's death, one faction, led by a son named Benito, held a meeting. 8 of the 13 living siblings were there. They voted to remove the current president, their brother Peter Paul, and elected a whole new set of officers. Well, a few months later, the other faction, led by Peter Paul, held its own meeting and elected a completely different set of officers. The result? Total chaos. With two groups claiming to be in charge, the banks had no idea who to listen to, so they froze the company's accounts. The business was completely paralyzed. So this is the puzzle at the very heart of the case. Which one of these meetings was legit? Which one actually had the legal authority to make decisions? The answer would decide who really controlled the entire company. Now, to figure that out, we need to get our heads around a few key legal ideas. These were the concepts that the courts focused on to solve this whole mess. First, let's go back to that idea of a closed corporation. Remember, this isn't some giant company traded on the stock market. It's a special structure designed for small, often family-run businesses where the lines between being an owner and a manager are blurred. The Supreme Court, in this very case, actually described it in this really great way. They said it's like a marriage between a partnership and a corporation. You get the close-knit, hands-on feel of a partnership, but with the legal shield of a corporation. This idea, this blend of ownership and management, is absolutely key. And second, we need to talk about maybe the most important word in this entire story, quorum. A quorum is just the minimum number of people you need in a room for a meeting to be official. If you don't have a quorum, any decision you make is basically worthless, legally speaking. It's like it never happened. Okay, and this right here is the crucial point. There are two different kinds of quorum. For a stockholders meeting, it's all about the shares. You need people who represent more than 50% of the company's stock to be there. But for a directors meeting, it's about the number of people. You just need more than half of the individual directors to show up. It doesn't matter how many shares each one owns. The whole case hinges on which type of meeting this was. So, armed with that knowledge, let's follow the Marasigan case as it starts climbing the legal ladder. The dispute started out at the local level, the regional trial court. From there, it was appealed to the Court of Appeals, and it finally landed in the lap of the Supreme Court for the final definitive word. And this just shows you how tricky the question was. The lower courts completely disagreed with each other.
The first court said, you know what, both meetings were invalid. Their logic was that since Luz's majority shares were tied up, nobody could possibly gather a majority of shares to form a quorum. But then the Court of Appeals completely reversed that decision. They said no, that first meeting in November was valid. Why? Because electing officers is a job for the board of directors. And for that, you just need a majority of the directors as people, not a majority of the shares.
So this total disagreement between the lower courts set the stage perfectly for the final showdown at the Supreme Court.
In the final verdict came down. The Supreme Court sided with the Court of Appeals. That first meeting, the one held back in November 2017, was legitimate. The officers elected by Benito's faction were in fact the rightful leaders of Ganco Resorts.
So how did they connect all the dots? Well, their reasoning was actually crystal clear. First, they looked at Ganco's own rulebook. The stockholders were also the directors. Second, they looked at corporate law. The act of electing officers is a power of the board of directors. So even though the family might have called it a stockholders meeting, the action they took, electing officers, needed a directors meeting in the eyes of the law. And for a directors meeting, you only need a majority of people. With Luz gone, there were 13 living directors. 8 of them showed up. 8 is more than half of 13. Boom, quorum was met. The meeting was valid. So, okay, we've gone through all the drama of this one family. But what can other family businesses out there actually learn from the whole Marasigan saga? Well, the Supreme Court's decision basically gives us a clear roadmap with 3 key rules. First, your founding documents, your articles of incorporation, are your Bible. The court went right back to what Ganco wrote down day 1, so be specific with your rules. Second, you have to know which hat you're wearing. Are you acting as an owner or as a manager? Because the rules are totally different depending on the action you're taking. And finally, if your own rules are vague or silent on something, the law's default rules will kick in and decide for you. That's exactly what happened here with a director's quorum. And that really leaves us with one last big question to think about. The Marasigan case is this powerful, real-world reminder that while passion and family ties are great for building a business, it's the clear rules and solid structure that allow it to actually survive its founders. It forces every family business to ask, is our foundation strong enough to withstand the inevitable storm of succession?